We can produce a lot more solutions quicker, right? But, and you actually alluded to this earlier, it shifts the capital allocation strategy. It's not that we're going to spend less on people. And this is I got to say, if I were to double underline something, there's actually an article today that I read, and the Schadenfreude was real. The number of CEOs I hear who are like, we're going to cut costs by getting AI. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I don't know that we're far enough along the AI route that we can really be like, oh, we're totally cutting costs. What I am doing is reallocating them, right? And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about, okay, where do I need to put in quality assurance, or where do I put in people and think about them more as managers of a group of agents, that sort of stuff.
Welcome to today's episode where we dive deep into the world of startups and scaling. In this conversation, Justin and Matt explore the critical challenges of growing a company, from managing rapid expansion to building effective teams. They'll discuss the evolving role of management in the age of AI and share insights on what it really takes to scale successfully in today's fast-paced business environment.
Matt, thank you so much for joining me on Scale Like a CEO. Just to get us started, if you wouldn't mind, give us a 90-second intro to you and your business.
Sure. So I've been building teams and products and companies for over 25 years. I would say over 25, because once you get to 25, you stop wanting to add years to that. The current company that I'm at, I started with two co-founders. And what we're trying to do is change fundamentally the way that folks deliver break-fix IT help desk support. We built a platform with AI, automation, and people come into a company, and we can take on usually about 75% of the break fix. And that lets customers, teams focus on things like project work or, escalated tickets, and really helps drive quality of service in the organization, improves employee morale.
Great. And what do you see as the biggest problem in your industry and how you're solving it?
Yeah, I think that one of the largest problems that we ran into was people having to make real trade-offs, right? So there was fundamentally a tension between achieving scale in your company. As your company grew, it usually hits you around 300, 400, 500 people, and you want to be delivering a high quality IT experience. At the same time, you're being pulled in 50 different directions. And so one of the things that leaders were being asked to do was effectively make a decision between like, okay, well, do we achieve cost control or do we achieve quality? And we thought that that was a little bit of a distinction that we shouldn't have to make. And so fundamentally what we said was, if we build the right platform and we have the right offering with the right people involved and have that mixture be correct, we can end up making it so IT leaders can go ahead and say, look, I'm going to continue to deliver that same bespoke feeling, white glove feeling quality of service to end users, even as my organization scales. And I'm going to do it without having the cost just absolutely get uncorked.
Nice. And what makes you unique in the way that you're helping others?
I think it comes down to sort of three key things that we do, right? So the first one is we believe fundamentally that people are a feature, not a bug. So in this world of AI and automation and things like this, everyone's like, oh, okay, we're just going to automate all the work away. And we discovered that fundamentally, like, you can't do that. That's just not a thing. Like, you can do some of it, right? But the actual interesting part is that, you can automate 85% of any job, but you can't automate 85% of the jobs. And that is to say, every job will have, the first 10% you can do automated, and then you need a human here, and then you need 50% that's automated, and then you need another human moment. And if you understand that mixture, you can end up achieving a tremendous amount of quality, but you still have to make room for the humans to be in that process. And we've all dealt with this. And if you're in IT or you're in any sort of technology, you realize this. Every now and then the robots just get confused, right? And when they do, if you've anticipated that, then you provide room for humans to step in and go, okay, let me help out. Let me figure this thing out. So that's the first piece. The second piece is we know that change is difficult. There's kind of a saying that in IT, the last mile is the bumpiest mile. And when you're talking about big, complex environments, big, complex organizations, they don't want to rip and replace anything. So what we did was we came in and we integrated with the existing technology. So I'm going to integrate with your ticketing system. I'm going to integrate with your back office systems. And we're using APIs and a real platform technology layer to help do that. And what that does is it basically allows us to achieve attention that the existing solutions weren't. MSPs tend to be focused on kind of people power, right? They are fundamentally, the existing providers were primarily, hey, you can outsource to my people. And then you had these automation vendors who were selling like, hey, we can automate everything, right? And what we're saying is actually there's a mixture. There's an ad mixture that is more correct or more profound. And that's what I think the key differentiator is, getting that mixture right.
Nice. So pivoting a little bit, I was looking at Fixify on LinkedIn. And if your employee count on LinkedIn is accurate, it looks like you are growing really fast, which is amazing. Tell me about that. As you've gone from, a founding team of 2 to where you are today, what are some of the challenges that you faced in scaling?
Sure. So I think One of the things that happens when you scale an organization, I've done this, I've been in an early stage startup a couple of other times as well. And when you start scaling, what you've got to realize is the fact that you start with an organization and you start doing this, the inner volume actually increases pretty dramatically, right? And it increases at a rate that is pretty rapid. And so very quickly, you have to start thinking about the idea that management in your organization actually becomes a thing, right? It's very easy to say, oh, okay, well, we'll hire some smart people and they'll know what to do. But very quickly, you wake up one day and you realize every one of these smart people is kind of off doing their own thing, and that gets really janky really fast. So actually thinking about the org structure and, okay, so in a well-run organization, every manager is going to be loaded at about 7-1, 8-1, something like that. Any bigger than that, and you're risking, hey, I have no idea what my people are doing. Now, in a startup that's growing really quickly, that might change. You might end up with, well, we got one team that's a 10-1. They're on the big hiring sprint. But that's not maintainable for long term, right? And so that's one of the things is you have to understand you're trading off, like when you do that, you're trading off that's like management level burnout. So that investment in management early, and management is an honest to God job. It's an actual factual craft. As technological founders, we always want to think like everyone's hands on keyboard slinging code. Like if you want a well-run company, if you want a company where people don't hate to come to work, you're going to end up having some people who aren't like that. So that's one thing. Second thing is like there are some things that you need to think about in terms of how you hire and how you scale hiring, because we as the founders very quickly realize like I'm not able to interview everybody, just not enough hours in the day to do it. And so what we end up doing is we've sort of set up a pretty rigorous way that we define and structure interviewing and job description so that we can ensure a certain quality in the new hires. And then we spend a lot of time, this is a lesson hard learned at previous gigs, we spend a lot of time trying to onboard people. When you come to work at the company, you get this document that's sort of like, this is your job. I'm going to go over your job description with you. Here are links to a bunch of stuff. Here's some videos you need to watch. And so the goal is to try to make sure that, everybody's had that experience. You go to your new job, you sit down on your first day and you're like, so after that lunch with the team, what do I do? And so we try to make sure that nobody has that experience here at Fixify.
Yeah. Okay. So all of that's music to my ears. I want to dig in a little bit on the first thing you were talking about, which is having managers. I also love hearing you say this 7-1 ratio, because that is, I mean, based on the, any recent research that I've read, that is kind of, as long as you're an experienced manager, 7 direct reports is kind of optimal. But I'm hearing so much, and, I don't think that there's going to be any magical equation on this for a while. I'm hearing so much that, with AI, AI-enabled employees, they can do so much more that then that ratio is getting blown out. So we're looking at, 10 to 15 to 1. And, I don't know yet. I think it's too early to really determine that. But I'm curious, what led you to that? Because that's not something that typical founders want, a management heavy organization.
Sure. So 2 things. One, I've worked in bigger companies before, right? And I've worked at growing startups before. And so I've seen sort of what big and operational organizations look like. And they usually tend to, if they're not completely janky, they usually tend to that 7-1 ratio. I've also been at startups where we violated that, where we bent closer to 10 to 15 to 1 because we were scaling up quickly. And so I've seen the problems that yields down the road, right? And then I'm in a position to kind of make those trade-offs and be like, oh, okay, there will be times we will push the envelope on that. There absolutely will be times when we're like hiring so fast that we're like, sorry, hey buddy, you're going to have to kind of take a hit for the team. And like, you're going to have, 12 direct reports for the next quarter. But I also understand the cost of that, both to that person and to all their direct reports, and honestly, to the effectiveness of the team. So having seen all that viscerally, like I didn't read into book, like I experienced it. And when you've experienced that, like, you're at your startup and you're like, why does everything suck? And then you're like, oh, that's right, because nobody actually knows what they're doing. And everybody's got like 9 complaints and there's no one to really complain to. So they complain to each other. And then you've got this like toxic soup. Let's not do that. Let's have good management. Let's have that structure. Now you did mention, and I'm interested, I don't know what the impact of AI longer term's gonna be. I don't know that we've necessarily seen a big expansion or compression in loading factors in that class of work. And I'll tell you why. At least as I think about it, is management is fundamentally a human endeavor, right? And it isn't to say that I couldn't use AI. So like we get some AI help when we write job descriptions, when we do certain types of reviewing of materials. But at the end of the day, So much of, if you look at manager tools, for instance, or any of the manager structure things, one of the first things they say is, okay, one of your biggest tools with managing your team is the one-on-ones you have with each one of your employees. Boom. Okay, cool. So if you're using a recorder and you can summarize notes from it, that may help make you significantly more effective, but there's no AI avatar going to that meeting. Similarly, your team meeting, right? You can use AI to like take summary notes. You can do outs, stuff like this. Maybe you have an agent reminder, but at the end of the day, like presence is important, right? So I think that we'll get better with it, and I think it will end up helping. But I think the amount of focus, the amount of human focus that you need to have, I don't know that it ends up being like 1 to 15, 1 to 50. Like I'm not sure we get there, but it's early days. So who can tell? Who can tell?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Just because, if I have 7 direct reports and just because they might be more productive because they're using AI, that doesn't make them less human. Like they're not then 0.5 person and I can have 14 now. And we'll see where it goes. The other interesting shift that someone told me recently is that now with AI, everyone is a manager of one,
Yeah, yeah.
which was an interesting thing to wrap your head around.
So this is where I think it gets really interesting, because I myself use a lot of AI in my day-to-day life. And what became interesting as I fumbled my way through it, right, was that so many of the skills that you pick up as an early manager ended up being the skills that were necessary to drive chat-based interactions with large language model-based agentic AI, right? So like things like being very clear in what you want, setting up the context, providing instructions and feedback. It was amazing to me. And I was like, wow. So these are all skills that honestly, if you think about skill development in particularly, we'll talk technical roles for right now, but I think this is across the board, is that you come into early career and we teach you a lot of technical skills. This is how you slang some code. This is how you work with these tools. This is how you do this programming language or whatever. And then later on, we start teaching you about, this is how you do project management. This is how you interact with teams. This is how you do it. And you pick up those as later career things. And then management is a later career thing. And it's like, we may see an inversion, right? So as I'm talking to college students now, I continue to harp on like, actually communication skills are a critical thing. The ability to think in language is important. I don't care if you think the ChatGPT can do it for you, because you have to at some point talk to the robot, right? But these management skills might be a thing that we want to front load as we're having people go through, is like, how do you coordinate and collaborate and think abstractly about the pieces of a problem, right? So my CTO recently just solved a relatively complicated problem, and he basically built a multi-agent system that, each one of them was given sub parts of the problem, right? Divided it up, away we go. Well, there's a skill there of like, how do I conceptualize the end state and then break that down into a series of chunks? And that's not a thing in general. If you have a software engineering background, you went to software engineering school, like you may have done a lot of that in decomposition, but a lot of other technical or non-technical groups, they just don't teach you to think that way. So I think there is a lot to that. I think there is a lot to that management team of one.
Yes, and those skills that make us human are becoming so much more necessary. I've written an article and spoken several times on, the urgent need for critical thinking in this age of AI, that, sure, we can plug in a prompt, and even if we're good at the prompt, we'll get a decent response, but we still need humans to make sure that what we're getting is going to work. And also, is it even valuable, or is it differentiated? Because a lot of what you get from, I'd think of in kind of content generation or things like that is very generic. So those things that make us human are so much more important, which makes me think about then, as you're hiring your team. So you had mentioned the interview process and bringing people on board. I'm curious, as you've been growing the team, what are some of the things that you're looking for in the skills that you're hiring for?
Sure. And I'll just operationalize just to start with in terms of how we do this, because we have a pretty structured way. And like, if anybody's interested in the book, I think it's called First Break All the Rules or something that like elaborates on this way of thinking about things. We break things into 3 buckets, right? So you have experience, skills, and traits when we're evaluating somebody for a job. So we take your job description and we extract out from that experience we need you to have. And experience really just sounds like you've been doing X for 10 years. You have done a thing, right? You have like working experience doing this thing, right? And then you have skills, which are things like you can program in Rust or you can make a budget, or right, these are things where like you have the knowledge to do the thing at some level. The key thing is I can teach a skill, right? Like if you didn't know how to program in Rust, we could teach you how to do it if we really had to, right? So there's an evaluative criteria. I cannot teach experience. You either have it or you don't. I can teach skills. And then the last piece is traits. And this is what I think you were alluding to. Traits are like the inbuilt things that make you, right? And that you bring to problem solving, right? So for instance, a good trait would be something like resilience, right? Systems thinking, right? Collaboration, the ability to engender trust. There's a whole bunch of things that we can unconsciously bring to problem solving. And this is why when you get a group of people together, if you've correctly assembled your team, you end up with these amazing superpowers because you have one person who's just always the out of the box thinker. They will not be constrained. Their muse is not fettered by the problem space, right? And they always come up with these interesting things. And you have somebody else who's really much more of a linear thinker and they're able to break things down into small chunks and help with the delivery. And you have somebody else who's going to crack the joke at exactly the right time. And you have assembled the Avengers. Those are all traits. You can't teach them, but you can screen for them. So when we're looking for people, and the other piece of those three is they operate at different time scales. Experience, I can count on your experience day one. If you have done a thing before, I'm going to show up, hand you a laptop and be like, you've done this, go get it. But very quickly that the utility of that to my company atrophies because I'm not trying to do something people have done before. We're doing something new. So if you've done the thing, cool, but now you're going to have to learn how to do it in my company. Skills, they're good for about the first 6 months, but I can teach almost anything to almost anybody in about 6 months. So if you think about it and you go, okay, well, I need these skills, but they're a lot more negotiable than you might imagine because of that ability. A decent computer programmer is going to come in, and if they're not used to programming a language that you have used, they're going to spend a couple of weeks and they will get facility and they will over time become very, very good at it. It's not a thing you have to worry about. But it's really the traits. And when we think about things like flexibility, when we think about things like resilience, think about things like systems thinking, these are some of the things that we tend to screen for in our roles because they tend to be when you see those things in people, then you end up seeing people who are going to adapt well to change in the environment. And that's fundamentally what we're talking about. When we're talking about AI, when we're talking about any massive new technology shift, is people who are able to say, oh, okay, cool. What worked yesterday doesn't work today. The models just got a lot better. Hey, let me change my working style, that sort of thing. And so people who are very flexible in the face of new things, they tend to adapt really well. And so we'll ask questions to sort of suss out like, hey, give me examples of other times you've done that. Like, tell me about that. So that's kind of how we approach it here at Fixify.
Yeah, I like that approach to thinking about the skills, competencies, the traits. I've been teaching interview skills for nearly 20 years, and there's this quadrant that I use that's similar where on the horizontal axis, it's either easy to teach or tough to teach. And on the vertical axis, it's nice to have or must have. And too often we focus on things that are must haves, but easy to teach.
Yep.
And the things that we need to be focusing on are the things that are hard to teach and must haves, because that's where people are really differentiated. And it is in those things of systems thinking, problem solving, critical thinking, those things that they are developable, teachable.
Go with it. Yeah, sure.
It's teachable in people, but it's not easy and it takes a lot of time. And sometimes there's kind of attitudinal things that get in the way. So yeah, I really like that approach that you're using.
To draft on that for just a second to say, I think attitudinal things that get in the way are really key, right? One of the things that happened to me early in career that was a real blocker is that I believed firmly that my skills were the thing that made me fit for a job. And I would spend a lot of time honing those skills and a lot of times defending those skills. So like I was a developer, like I was a software engineer. I built software. I knew how the metal worked. That was that. And it took a while for me to realize that those actually weren't the skills that got me the job or kept me in the job or made me useful, right? The skills that made me useful was my ability to learn quickly and my ability to do systems thinking and my ability to collaborate with other people. And I think too often we give short shrift to the sort of, they're slightly more ephemeral. But if you go through as a manager and you actually have a structured approach to performance management in your company, you can sit down with people and be like, hey, let me talk to you about your superpowers. And this is actually the structure we tend to use is like, let me just tell you about your superpowers and let me tell you about your super weaknesses, right? And those superpowers aren't going to show up like, you're the best gosh darn Golang programmer I've ever seen. Like, that's sure, great. they're going to show up like, hey, you're a really amazing systems thinker. Let me give you a couple examples of that so that you can take a moment to think about valuing that in yourself so that when you're looking for your next job, you can go ahead and say, yeah, actually, the things that I'm good at and the things that give me energy look like this. Let me go find that, right? Best example, I've worked in cybersecurity for years and ended up working with an incredibly talented person who did threat intel, and our ability to match attackers to threat groups and like techniques and things like this was just unparalleled. And they actually thought that was their job skill. And I was like, no, 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 your job skill is in like connecting information. Like you can do that with anything, right? Like you could sit down with anything and almost immediately see the mappings between A and B and C and D. It's the way your brain is wired, right? You do that like breathing, right? That's your superpower. Not, yes, you're an amazing at threat intel, so maybe stay in that industry. That's fine. But the actual thing that you do, that's a thing that I think a lot of people fight because, again, like what's valued on any given Thursday is my ability to slang some software.
Yeah. I like two things. One is I really like that when you call out someone's superpower, you give them examples, concrete examples of why that is having that illustration is so important. And I also appreciate your vulnerability in sharing, kind of what held you back earlier around those technical skills, because I see it so often. And it's in particular for people who invest a lot of time and energy into developing specific skills. They tend to overvalue those skills over the things that like you've got to do that job, right? If that's your job, software programming, you've got to be able to do that, but it never happens in a vacuum. And so you also need to be able to do that with people and collaborate and problem solve and all of those other things. So I really appreciate that vulnerability and sharing that. I'm curious, as you look forward, what does the future look like at Fixify?
Well, so we're obviously a relatively early stage startup, so we're continuing to hire and build a company. We have got paying customers now, which is always an exciting milestone. We closed some really big ones recently. As we continue to grow the investments that we're actually making, and this is where I think it really gets interesting, is as you think about when you're building out a large scale organization and as the CEO or as the leadership team, your job, like one of your jobs, I guess, is capital allocation. So you start thinking about like, okay, where are we going to put resources to solve certain classes of problems? One of the things that's interesting to me is when we think about injecting a lot of AI, making people much more effective with using tooling and things like this, we can produce a lot more software, we can produce a lot more solutions quicker, right? But, and you actually alluded to this earlier, it shifts the capital allocation strategy. It's not that we're going to spend less on people. And this is I got to say, if I were to double underline something, there's actually an article today that I read, and the Schadenfreude was real. The number of CEOs I hear who are like, we're going to cut costs by getting AI. And I'm like, okay, cool. But I don't know that we're far enough along the AI route that we can really be like, oh, we're totally cutting costs. What I am doing is reallocating them, right? And so we're spending a lot of time thinking about, okay, where do I need to put in quality assurance, or where do I put in people and think about them more as managers of a group of agents, that sort of stuff. But longer term, building that out, establishing the larger market presence and building out teams around, now that we have a growing customer base, thinking about customer success, customer support, and then continuing to build the internal team, both in engineering and our operations, the people who actually do help desk work. And the thing there is, as we do that, we're starting to invest in management as a real craft. Okay, so think management training courses, think a performance management structure. So all of the internal gorp that it takes to actually run a well-functioning organization, because we could get to be 300 people and be totally dysfunctional. Don't want to get there. So we're trying to get there on the glide path by making those investments.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, to make a little commentary on the recent article, what is disturbing to me is that a couple of years ago when companies were doing layoffs, it was like shameful. And now there's this sense of pride. Like just read an article. I won't name the CEO by name, but like this kind of prideful announcement of how many people he was going to lay off because of AI. And I'm like, wow, okay. And is that going to be the most effective way to manage your humans? Because I know case studies where CEOs have hired someone to come in and automate like crazy with a promise of we're not going to let go of people, and then they let go of the people. But then 3 months later, all of that automation broke because there were no humans tending to it. And then not sure how they're doing today. Probably not too well, because I don't think many of those people wanted to go back to that company.
Well,
So it's
I mean, just to call out, ever since Frederick Taylor did like the first work study, okay, we've been trying to take people and optimize them to the point where we don't need them anymore. And there are places where that works. And that's the thing I think we all need to embrace is there's places where honestly people don't need to do this labor, but there's so many places where they still do. And I think to your point, losing that view or like saying, oh, well, it's like this expansion of the robots is infinite. If it is okay, but it's definitely not today. Right.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining me. If folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so?
I'm on LinkedIn and active there. So just look me up, Matt Peters from Fixify, and on LinkedIn. And also you can hit up our corporate website as well, fixify.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks so much.